Hello everyone, Bag here. With the second half of 2.5 coming up in a short amount of time, I think it's time to look at the main units of the upcoming banner to see how they could possibly fit into your account, with this banner featuring Lingsha and Topaz. Now, just to say for the sake of clarity, this video is obviously coming just purely from a meta standpoint. If you want these units because you like them, or because you think that you can use them well, just go for them. While I will be pretty critical on if they are worth going for, they are both very strong units in their own right if they do end up on your account. But if you are wondering how they can be valued over their respective alternatives, this is the video for you. First off, let's look at Topaz. So Topaz is an interesting unit that falls into a similar category to Jiaoshu, in that while she is a very strong unit just by looking at her in isolation, it is difficult to recommend her as a competitive pull just due to how contentious her role is with cheaper alternatives. The two main teams you'll use her in are either with a premium ratio team or a premium facial team. You could also use her with the new Hunt March or Mose for a more niche follow-up team, but the aforementioned two premium teams are her most common roles. So let's look at them one by one. For a ratio, she takes on the role of the sub DPS that provides 1 debuff at E0S0. In this, she has two very clear weaknesses. 1, her true potential is very expensive, and 2, she is ultimately pretty replaceable. For 1, it should be noted that she really wants Aventurine as the sustain on this team, since his follow-ups help immensely with pushing up Numbi more consistently. This makes it harder to use Gallagher for ratio, who is usually the first choice for covering up a lack of debuffs for a ratio team. Her E1 and S1 both provide an extra debuff, but this just makes her perform at the level that an E1 S1 character should perform at. It's hard to give her a lot of extra points if she requires that heavy investment to be very notable. At base, you have to make some concessions with using her, either with using Gallagher, or in just getting by with debuffs by relying on Aventurine's ult. For 2, in a team with Ratio, Robin, and Aventurine, it's hard to say that she is much better than just using Ting Yun, in which you'd have an easier time justifying Gallagher, or Mose, who provides 2 debuffs at E0. Ting Yun in particular is a great pair with Robin, making zero cycling pretty realistic for an overall cheap team. And if that's the case, is there really a reason to get Topaz for this team if it's already very possible to zero cycle with a cheaper team? What I've said here with her competition is also the case when using her with Yeonli, and that while she is a great partner, losing Ting Yun with Robin is a pretty big loss. If you aren't using Robin though, but rather someone like Ranmei or Jiaoshu, then while that does make her easier to justify using, it also means that you aren't using her with her best support anymore, that being Robin. She's best paired with Robin, but Robin has better cheaper teammates, so this is just a tricky situation overall. And even if you disagree with me on that, which I do think is pretty contentious, I'd very confidently say that Robin is better for your account than Topaz anyways, and her banner is happening, like, right now. So the only time you'd get Topaz for Ratio or Yeonli over Robin is if you just like Topaz, which again is completely fine. Anyways, back on track, let's look at Fei Xiao. And here we have a similar problem, in that Mose and the Hunt March give her a run for her money in the sub DPS role. While she is the best out of the three generally in this role, getting her is a lot less recommended in the investment order for a Fei Xiao team before getting Robin, Robin E1, or Fei Xiao S1. She is in a weird limbo state in which if you do have her, she can be great, but it's hard to recommend her since other investment options are usually stronger for the teams that she features in. Her heavy reliance on vertical investment options to stand out also does her no favors when looking at her at E0S0. Am I being too harsh? Maybe. She is a perfectly fine unit, again, but with the introduction of Mose, most accounts will passively accrue copies of him as he is slowly featured in more and more banners, making her status as a premium option all the more questionable. Get her if you want her. If you have teams in mind for her to be used in, she will do her role just fine. But just remember that there are better investment options for those teams, mostly just being Robin, within the current and future banners. Also, if you are thinking about going for her Lycone, it is a very nice addition for Fei Xiao and Ratio teams due to its debuff, but keep in mind that Fei Xiao's banner is going on, again, like right now. So if you're building for her team, I'd say it's just generally better to go for Fei Xiao's Lycone instead, if you don't care about how universal Topaz's Lycone can be across different teams. The best scenario for a heavily invested Topaz is if you have multiple teams that she can be used in which case getting her Lycone or her E1 to further that strength can be a good choice. But that's a rather niche account scenario, even with how strong follow-ups are in the meta right now. Next, there is Lingsha, and funnily enough, I have a very similar stance to her as I did with Topaz. She fits into this ever-growing trend of being great in isolation but hard to recommend pulling for, with the competition this time being Gallagher. For the two main break teams, Boothill and Firefly, I would firstly be cautious to recommend her for Boothill. Yes, her break debuffs are great, but without a fire implant, her high toughness damage is only situationally called for, and since a lot of the time you were running Bronya with Boothill, the tight SP usually calls for Gallagher's unique strength and SP generation rather than just higher raw numbers. And also when you're using Bronya, you likely aren't using Harmony Trailblazer, meaning that Lingsha's high super break damage is null and void. While both her and Gallagher are situational in when they can contribute to toughness damage, Gallagher's use in SP generation is more useful offensive utility compared to Lingsha's comfort in healing and cleansing. When supporting Firefly, this is a lot nicer of a situation since the more consistent presence of Super Break and fire weaknesses lets her strengths more clearly shine, but it is again difficult to recommend her over other options for investment for Firefly teams, like most notably with E1 Ron May. And if you already have that much investment in this team, it's questionable if further investments are even necessary over investing into your other team. This makes her position to basically just be that if you really like Firefly and want her to be as strong as possible in every role on her team, Lingsha is a great choice, but her stiff competition to a free unit, since Gallagher was an event reward 2 patches ago, makes her, say it with me now, difficult to recommend. I'll also say her S1 is pretty funny since Gallagher can use it as well as she can, so since light cones are generally cheaper than characters, I'd say just giving him her light cone can be a great option, since break teams don't really care about quid pro quo too much as of right now, other than something like Ronmei's ult uptime. This light cone banner also has the new 4-star hunt light cone, which is actually a breaking light cone that is Boothill's new best 4-star option, so it might be worth going for if you want to snipe a copy of that too. Generally, for premium sustains, you want them to be as universal as possible, so that you can slot them into as many teams as you can. Lingsha's singular damage buff being related to breaking makes her lackluster in this factor. Yes, she also has follow-ups, which can make her competitive with Aventurine in the niches that he has, but in that competition, she usually loses out to him due to him having relevant damage buffs for standard crit carries. She is better than Luocha in that she has a niche in teams, and her comfort in healing and cleanses is of course top of the line, but trading something like Huohuo's energy and attack buffs for follow-ups and break buffs? Just make sure you know what you're paying for if you get her. Man, going into this video, I did not intend to be so negative about this banner, but I think both of these units illustrate an important point about investment. Competition is important. If Mose, Hunt March, or Gallagher did not exist, these two units would be literally twice as recommendable, if not more. But that's not how the meta is right now, and I can't ignore them when factoring in how pullable these units are. Again, they are very strong in their own right, and they won't be benched anytime soon if you get them. But would I say either of them are quote-unquote worth it? Probably not. Let's also just quickly go over the 4 stars if you are interested in this banner. Natasha is Natasha. Not only is she free and her Eidolons aren't that important, but she's pretty thoroughly outclassed by Lynx and Gallagher, both of whom are or have been free to obtain at one point or another. Misha is semi-usable, but I would not really recommend to go for him unless if you specifically want to use him. If you build the right team around him, his burst damage can be pretty sizable, but if you have 2 limited carries on your account, then you probably won't even need him at E6. His E2 is a pretty large jump in his damage, so if you do want to go for him, that's the main target to make him as usable as possible. And finally, Gwenhyphen is a usable debuffer and dot applier that is both universal in her capabilities while also ultimately being rather replaceable. If you want her for dot or for cheap Acheron teams, her E6 is a pretty nice upgrade in her performance, but I wouldn't stress too much about getting her as built as you possibly can, since for either Acheron or dot teams, the ultimate goal is to replace her with better options later down the line. If you are fine with sticking with her because building the most premium team is not your main goal, then yeah, I'd say she's pretty valuable. And even if that doesn't apply to you, I'd still call her the best 4-star on this banner. So overall, I feel like you already have a good idea of what I think about this banner. Strong, but the competition makes it difficult to recommend, yada yada yada. It doesn't help too that the 4 stars aren't that worth going for, compared to the current banner that has Mose, which yes, I am salty about because I haven't gotten a single copy of him in 90 polls. Anyways, that's everything from me. Subscribe for more and check out my other vids, and also I have a new end screen. Ooh, look at how pretty it is. Anyways, bye!